I had a day off yesterday. Saturday has sort of become my day off, and as you do on your day off, I had a very pleasant trip to the dump. But it seems to me the dump isn't what it used to be. I mean, it's quite exciting, isn't it? But am I the only person who remembers going to the dump as a child? And it was very, very unlike what it is today. I don't know if I'm getting confused with pictures of sort of, from around the world. But when I was a boy, when you went to the dump, you drove into this huge expanse of wasteland, and all the rubbish was kind of piled up in big heaps. Isn't that not true? And didn't you want to get out of the car and go and climb up the heap of rubbish? I know that I did. I mean, it was just organised chaos, wasn't it? And then there was the smell. Do you remember the smell? You don't get that smell at the dump anymore, I'm afraid. It was a smell that was somehow both horrible and yet strangely attractive. It was that kind of, I hate it, but I want it kind of thing. There was a very famous Christian thinker and writer in the 20th century called Francis Schaeffer. Very famous. And as a boy, he lived in the city of Philadelphia in the USA, a very big city. And every Saturday, he would hike out of the city in order to get into the countryside. And every Saturday, he would take a shortcut through the city dump. And later on, he said, I never forgot it. It was a place of junk, fire, and stench. And he said, it has helped me tremendously to think back to that place. Because even as a boy, I realised that I saw there almost everything people spent their money for. That dump was where their investment ended. When I was aged about 20, my most treasured investment was my record collection. My hero, believe it or not, was a DJ called Pete Tong. And it was very simple. This is how it worked. He had a radio show on Capital Radio late Saturday afternoon, and it worked like this. If Pete Tong played it, then I bought it. Okay? So I don't want to boast, but my record collection today is frankly outstanding. And there was a time when I handled each piece of vinyl with reverence and awe. Each record was a holy object. It was set apart and sanctified for my use. But if I'm honest, my records are just a nuisance now. We don't have room for them. I don't have time for them. I don't even have a record player that works properly. Don't buy me one. And so these records lie in various places around our home, gathering dust and decaying. And yet I spent a fortune. I spent a fortune in time and money accumulating that collection. And you know what? Here's the most extraordinary thing. When I'm dead and buried, my children will dig out all of those records, and you know what they'll do? They'll take them down the dump. I'd love you to have Jesus' words from Matthew 6 in front of you. I want you to read what he says right at the beginning, verse 19. Matthew 6, verse 19. Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. Most people, including most of us, most Christians, we live for treasure on earth. That's what we live for. Which is really tragic, because all earthly treasure, without exception, it will rust, or it will break, or it will be stolen. Do you know the identity of the worst thief in all the world? The worst thief in all the world is death. 5 minutes after we die, or even quicker, everything in which we have invested in this life will be robbed from us. It will be taken from us. Our records, our cars, our DVDs, our books, our jewellery, our haircut. Death is a thief. So Jesus says, verse 20, these amazing words. He says, given all of that, store up instead treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. He says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, which you can take with you. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, which will last for eternity. How do you store up treasures in heaven? How do you do it? He says that you can, so how do you do it? We'll come back to that. Second question, okay? What are you looking at? I don't mean at me. I mean, what are you looking at? Verse 22, Jesus says the eye is the lamp of the body. He's using picture language to say your eyes have huge control over your behaviour. So you must get your perspective right. Imagine walking across a field, okay? And as long as you fix your eyes on the stile or the gate at the other side of the field, then you will walk across the field in a straight line, won't you? But if you keep looking at that beautiful cow over there to the left, or that sheep, or that view, then you will veer over to the left. What does that mean for how we live? What is Jesus trying to tell us? I think it's this. Some of us, we only look to the moment. We only look for today. We live for today. We never think about tomorrow. We never think about the consequences. So what are we like? We say yes to everything, don't we? And then a better offer comes along and we go with that. Because who cares? It's all about the moment. It's all about today. But some of us would never dream of behaving like that, would we? Because we only look to tomorrow. And so we plan very carefully for the future. But the problem is, this is how it works. We can't commit to anything in the future because you don't know what the future holds. And what we commit to today might affect what we can do in the future. But Jesus says, look, I'm really sorry, but that's not true. The Christian life is not about living for today. The Christian life is not about living for tomorrow. The Christian life, says Jesus, is about living for eternity. Not today, not tomorrow, but eternity. People don't say it so much now, do they? But once upon a time, people used to say about Christians, the problem with Christians is they're too heavenly minded to be of any earthly use. But Jesus says here, it's the absolute opposite. If you look only to today, then you will be too busy to give or to serve generously. Jesus says if you look only to tomorrow, then you'll be too worried to give or to serve generously. Do you know, here's the extraordinary thing. It's actually those who are most heavenly minded who are able to be most generous with their earthly treasure. Let me say that again. It's actually people who are most heavenly minded who are able to be most generous with their earthly treasure. Okay, here's the third question. We've had where is your treasure? We've had what are you looking at? So here's the third question. Who are you serving? And verse 24, Jesus says, no one can serve two masters. And Jesus says it doesn't work. Whatever you value most, that will be what you end up serving. If you value money or stuff, then that will be your master. Now, please don't mishear these verses. Please don't mishear this. People often think Jesus is saying, you cannot be rich. People sometimes think Jesus is saying, you can never be rich. You can never own stuff. You can never enjoy stuff. He's not saying that. No way. He's not saying it. He's saying, do enjoy what God has given you. But he's saying, please, please don't be mastered by it. That's the thing, isn't it? Don't be mastered by money. If you serve earthly treasure, it will capture your heart. It will capture your heart, and then God and his kingdom will just become yet another distraction. Okay, let's take a breath. Take a little breath at this point, okay? These are hard things, aren't they? Hard things to get our heads around. But I want you to glance down with me at a remarkable verse, okay? I want you to look right to the end of the readings. I want you to look at verse 33. You know this verse. You've heard it before. It's really famous. Jesus says, verse 33, "But seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." All these things. You see, I want to say to you this morning, the Christian life is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive. What looks like loss is actually massive gain. Let me give you an example, and it's an example lots of you have heard me say before, so forgive me saying it again, but it's worth just saying it. When we do marriage preparation with young couples, they come to our house and we talk through what marriage is going to look like, and we always get onto the subject of children, and we talk about whether they're going to have children and maybe how many children they're going to have and all that sort of thing. And I always look at the husband-to-be and I ask him this question. It's always the husband-to-be, okay? I ask him this question. I say, listen, what do you think is the most important thing a father can do for his children? What's the most important thing a father can do for his children? Answer: the most important thing. The most important thing a father can do for his children is love their mother. There is no loss. There is only gain for the child whose father loves his or her mother. We've got to see, if Jesus is our master, there is no loss. If we are seeking first his kingdom, there is no loss, because he says all these things will be given to us as well. Isn't that extraordinary? So let's go back to that question. How do you store up treasure in heaven? How do you do it? Okay? The ancient Egyptians, they built pyramids, didn't they? And they put all their earthly treasure into their pyramid so that they could take their earthly treasure with them into the afterlife. But it didn't work, did it? How do we know it didn't work? Because if you go to the British Museum, it's all in the British Museum. It didn't go with them, did it? So people say, don't they, you can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. But it's not true. You can. You can. But what you must do, you must convert your earthly treasure into the currency of heaven. And the currency of heaven is love and good works. How do you store up treasures in heaven? You store up treasure in heaven by being generous with earthly treasure. Do you see? If I may, can I give you a few of the facts of life? Because we're not children, are we? So here are a few facts. Here in Denton, we're part of the Church of England. We're part of the Diocese of Chichester. And this year, we will pay the Diocese of Chichester £39,400. £39,400. Ouch, that's a lot of money, isn't it? But actually, it is not what the diocese say it costs to have our church buildings and to have a full-time minister in Denton. The absolute minimum cost to the diocese in 2016 is £44,000. Please, please believe me, I don't get all that money, all right? Just let's be clear. £44,000. But here's the thing, we've got other expenses on top of that, okay? We have to maintain the buildings that we have. This building, Tarring Neville, the hall, we have to maintain them. We are responsible for the cost of all of the ministry that we do. Nobody else is responsible. There is no cavalry coming over the hill. It's us. But why should there be any cavalry? If we take Jesus' words seriously, if we really do, what he's saying to us is there is no loss in giving. There is only investment. All we're doing when we give is we are converting the currency of earth into the currency of heaven. That's what he says. So every year, it's really important, I'm afraid, that I talk about giving and that we all think about giving. I don't mean our fundraising. That's irrelevant. I don't mean our raffle money. That's irrelevant. I'm talking about giving. And bluntly, I mean our gospel giving, our giving to gospel ministry. Can I say, this is really important, the Church of Jesus Christ and his gospel has never been more unpopular. There will always be other causes which are much more deserving, much more attractive, much more praiseworthy, much more creditable. The world will never applaud you for gospel giving. The world will applaud you for giving to almost anything else. But please understand, the world will not applaud you for the gospel either. So I want to say, if we, the church, don't feel the responsibility to give, we can be absolutely certain no one else will. No one else will. So by all means, give elsewhere. Give generously. Give widely. But if you're a Christian, I want to say gospel giving should be your first priority. So let me just finish with a couple of suggestions. How much should we give? Well, the good news is the Bible doesn't say. The Bible does not say how much to give. But look down at verse 21. Verse 21, Jesus says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." You see, our giving says a huge amount about what we really treasure. So I want to say, try giving 10% of your gross income and see what happens. Remember, this is really important. 10% of nothing is nothing. 10% of not very much is not very much. I'm not asking anybody to give from what you don't have. I'm asking you to give from what you do have. And you'll never, ever outgive God. God loves it when we give. He loves it when we give. It is the supreme act of dependence on him and trusting his word. Let me give you a very quick story from my own history, okay? I'm sure I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because lots of us are quite new. My final year at theological college, I had to raise the money to do a third year at theological college. And it was quite a big sum of money that I had to raise. So I wrote to all my Christian friends. I didn't write to any of my family. I didn't write to any non-Christians. I wrote just to my Christian friends. And I applied to a couple of trusts as well. In the end, we actually had an overshoot of £4,000. £4,000 more than we needed came in. But I still didn't have a job to go to at the end of college. And so we wondered what to do with this extra money. We looked to the future. We think the future is very uncertain. Maybe we've been given this money to provide for our future. Let me tell you, humanly speaking, there seem to be very good reasons to hold on to that £4,000. Wife and 4 children with nowhere to live. But we decided to give the £4,000 back to 2 of the trusts that have been really generous with us. And can I tell you, my hand hovered over that checkbook. I found it very hard to apply ink to the checkbook. I thought, that is a lot of money. We were given this money. It's our money. Am I really going to give this money away? All of it? £4,000? It took a real effort. But here's the most astonishing thing. On the very day I signed the checks and put them in the post, I got a job. The day. You see, you cannot outgive God. I really promise you. So that's how much. And then second thing, I want to say start giving in a planned way. If you don't plan to give, you won't give. It's as simple as that. If you don't plan to give, you won't give. I'm speaking from experience. I really am. The very best thing would be to join the parish giving scheme. It costs you nothing, but it is such a blessing to this church. It's such a blessing to our treasurer. The extraordinary thing is that you give your gift. If you're a UK taxpayer, we get the gift aid back automatically. We don't have to recover it. It's an extraordinary scheme. So please do think about it. It is the most efficient way to give. And in setting it up, it will help you to think through that question, where is my treasure? It will help you to think through the question, what am I looking at? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Or is it eternity? It will help you to think through the question, who am I serving? Who am I serving? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Let's pray together.